The screaming stopped at exactly 3:17 a.m. After 3 years working nights at Clearwater Mental Health, I knew that silence was worse than any sound. Room 7 had been sealed since my first day, but tonight the hallway reeked of antiseptic and something metallic I couldn't place. Dr. Matthews emerged from the shadows, his white coat stained dark at the sleeves, escorting a patient I'd admitted just hours before. The woman who went in was trembling, terrified, begging for her mother. The woman who came out walked with mechanical precision, her eyes vacant as glass. When I checked our patient roster, her name had been erased. But I remembered her face, and I remembered her screams before the silence fell. My name is Jake Thompson, and I should have quit that night. Instead, I made the mistake of getting curious. Room 7's doors stood slightly ajar for the first time in 3 years, revealing medical equipment that didn't belong in any psychiatric facility I knew. The security footage from that hallway had been corrupted for weeks, they said. Just a technical malfunction. I should have believed them. It started with the schedules. 3 weeks after that first glimpse into Room 7, I began paying attention to patterns. Every Tuesday night, Dr. Matthews stayed late. Not just late, but specifically until dawn. His car, a black Mercedes with government plates, would sit in the parking lot until the morning shift arrived. The patients he selected weren't random either. Always the new admissions. Always the ones with mild conditions, who wouldn't be missed if they became a little more compliant, a little quieter. I kept a small notebook tucked inside my uniform pocket, documenting times, patient names, behavioral changes. Tuesday, October 3rd. Patient Rebecca Walsh, admitted for anxiety disorder. Selected for extended therapy session at 2:45 a.m. Returned at 5:30 a.m. No longer exhibiting nervous tics. Tuesday, October 10th. Patient David Kumar, mild depression. Session from 3:15 to 6 a.m. Stopped asking about discharge dates afterward. Tuesday, October 17th. Patient Maria Santos, panic attacks. Post-session, she stared at walls for hours without blinking. The official therapy schedules never listed these sessions. When I checked our patient management system, there were gaps in the digital records. Clean gaps, like someone had surgically removed specific time blocks from the database. My supervisor, Helen Carson, noticed me paying attention during our monthly review meeting. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and perfectly manicured nails that clicked against her clipboard when she spoke. Thompson, your performance reviews are excellent. But I've noticed you've been asking questions about patient scheduling. She leaned forward across her desk. I want to remind you that your job is medication distribution and welfare checks. Nothing more. I was just trying to understand the therapy rotations better. Some patients seem confused about their sessions. Confusion is normal during treatment. Patients often experience disorientation as their conditions improve. Her smile was cold. I trust you'll focus on your assigned duties. We wouldn't want any misunderstandings about your role here. The warning was clear. But that night, I watched Dr. Matthews again. This time I noticed something else. The patients he escorted to room 7 walked normally going in. They came out with a specific gait, measured and precise, like they were consciously thinking about each step. I tried talking to Rebecca Walsh the next evening. She was sitting in the common room, staring at a television that wasn't turned on. How are you feeling, Rebecca? She looked at me with those empty eyes. Fine. I feel fine. Do you remember your therapy session last night? A long pause. I don't recall, but I feel better now. What did Dr. Matthews talk to you about? Another pause. Longer this time. Her face scrunched in concentration, like she was trying to access a file that had been corrupted. I don't remember, but it helped me. I feel much better now. The same words. The exact same phrasing Maria Santos had used the week before. That's when I realized the Tuesday pattern wasn't just about scheduling. It was about something much worse. And Dr. Matthews was going to continue every week until someone stopped him. Sarah. Chen arrived on a Thursday night in November, escorted by 2 police officers who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. She was small, maybe 5'3", with long black hair that fell across her face as she hunched forward in the wheelchair. Her intake form listed mild anxiety, disorder, and insomnia. But there was nothing mild about the way she gripped my wrist when I introduced myself. "They're watching me," she whispered, her dark eyes darting toward the officers. "I know how this sounds, but someone has been following me for weeks. They know where I work, where I live. They know things about me that I never told anyone." "Who's watching you, Sarah?" "I don't know. Men in suits. They show up wherever I go." My therapist said it was paranoid ideation, but I'm not paranoid. I'm being stalked. The officers exchanged glances. The older one, Officer Martinez, shook his head slightly. "She's been making these claims for 3 weeks. No evidence of stalking. No police reports filed until she showed up at the station screaming about government surveillance. I read through her medical history while she changed into patient clothing. No previous psychiatric treatment. No family history of mental illness. She was a grad student in psychology at the local university, working part-time at a research lab. Her academic records showed consistent high performance until 3 weeks ago when she'd stopped attending classes." "Sarah, can you tell me what happened 3 weeks ago? What changed?" She looked around the intake room, checking the corners, the door, the observation window. "I found something at work. Research files that weren't supposed to be in our database. Studies about memory modification and behavioral conditioning. When I tried to ask my supervisor about them, she said the files didn't exist." "What kind of memory modification?" "Targeted removal of specific memories while leaving personality intact. The research was funded by a Department of Defense grant, but it was buried under civilian mental health studies." She grabbed my arm again. "The next day, the men in suits started following me. They wanted to know what I'd seen. I made notes in her chart, but something about her story felt different from typical paranoid presentations. Her fears seemed specific, to ground it in concrete details. Most paranoid patients talked in vague terms about threats. Sarah was describing systematic surveillance. "Have you told anyone else about these files?" "My roommate, my professor, my parents." But the next day, they all said I was imagining things. Even my roommate denied the conversation we'd had. Like everyone around me suddenly got amnesia about what I'd told them. Dr. Matthews appeared in the doorway. I hadn't heard him approach, which was unusual because his dress shoes normally clicked against the linoleum floors. He was tall and thin, with gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses that reflected the fluorescent lights. "Ms. Chen, I'm Dr. Matthews. I'll be overseeing your treatment." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I understand you've been experiencing some distressing thoughts about surveillance." Sarah shrank back in her chair. "I know you. I don't believe we've met. You were at the university last month. You gave a lecture about cognitive behavioral therapy to our psychology department. You talked about memory and conditioning." Dr. Matthews's smile flickered for just a moment. "I give many lectures. Now, let's focus on getting you the help you need." As he spoke, I noticed Sarah's pupils dilate with genuine terror. This wasn't paranoid delusion. This was recognition. And the way Dr. Matthews was looking at her, like he was studying a specimen, made something cold settle in my stomach. He scheduled her first therapy session for the following Tuesday at 3 a.m. I realized then that Sarah Chen hadn't been brought to Clearwater for treatment. She'd been brought here because she'd discovered something she shouldn't have, and Dr. Matthews was going to make sure she never remembered it. Tuesday came like a death sentence. I'd spent 3 days trying to convince myself that my suspicions about Dr. Matthews were unfounded, that Sarah's paranoia had infected my judgment. But when I saw her during evening rounds, sitting on her bed and staring at the wall with the same hollow expression as the other Tuesday patients, I knew something terrible was about to happen. At 2:45 a.m., I positioned myself at the nurse's station with a clear view of the hallway leading to room 7. The ward was quieter than usual. Even the patients who normally paced or talked to themselves had fallen silent, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Dr. Matthews appeared at exactly 3 a.m., moving with that unnaturally quiet walk of his. He unlocked Sarah's room and emerged moments later, with her walking beside him. She was docile, compliant, but I could see the terror in her posture. Her shoulders were rigid, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. They passed the nurse's station without acknowledging me. As they walked toward room 7, I heard Sarah whisper something. "Please don't do this. I won't tell anyone what I saw." Dr. Matthews didn't respond. The door to room 7 closed with a soft click that echoed down the empty hallway. I waited 30 seconds, then moved closer, keeping my footsteps silent on the linoleum. The walls were thick, but if I pressed my ear against the door, I could make out muffled sounds from inside. First, Dr. Matthews's voice, calm and clinical. "Please lie back on the table, Ms. Chen. This will help with your anxiety." Then Sarah, her voice higher, more frightened. "What is that? What are you doing?" "Just some monitoring equipment. It's perfectly safe." A mechanical worry sound, like old computer equipment starting up. Then a low humming that seemed to vibrate through the walls. I'd never heard anything like it in a medical facility. Sarah's voice became more panicked. "Stop. Please, stop. I can't move my arms. The restraints are for your safety. Try to relax." The humming grew louder. Through the door, I could hear electronic beeping, rapid and irregular. Then, Sarah screamed, a sound of pure terror that made my blood freeze. But the scream cut off abruptly, like someone had flipped a switch. Silence. For 2 hours. There was nothing but that electronic humming and occasional mechanical sounds. No voices, no movement. At 5:15 a.m., the humming stopped. 5 minutes later, the door opened. Dr. Matthews emerged first, looking calm and professional. His white coat was pristine, except for a small stain on the left sleeve that looked like blood. He held the door open and gestured for someone to exit. Sarah walked out, but it wasn't Sarah anymore. The woman who entered room 7 had moved with jerky, terrified energy. The woman who came out walked with mechanical precision, each step measured and deliberate. Her face was blank, expressionless, like someone had erased her personality and left only basic motor functions. Dr. Matthews escorted her back to her room. I followed at a distance, watching as he helped her into bed with the gentle care of a nurse tucking in a child. She lay down without resistance, staring at the ceiling with those empty eyes I'd seen on so many other Tuesday patients. "Sleep well, Sarah. You'll feel much better in the morning." She didn't respond, didn't even blink. After Dr. Matthews left, I approached her room. Through the observation window, I could see her lying motionless on the bed. Her eyes were open, but there was nobody home behind them. I checked her chart the next morning. The night's events were documented as successful anxiety reduction therapy session. Her medication schedule had been altered, with several psychiatric drugs removed and replaced with something I didn't recognize. At the bottom of the page, in Dr. Matthews's handwriting, was a note. Patient showing significant improvement. Continue. Weekly sessions as needed. But when I looked at Sarah during morning rounds, I knew the truth. The vibrant, terrified graduate student who'd been brought in 3 days ago was gone. In her place was something that looked human, but moved like a machine programmed to mimic life. Whatever Dr. Matthews had done in room 7, it had worked perfectly. Sarah Chen no longer remembered anything about research files or surveillance or the terrible truth she'd discovered. She no longer remembered being human at all. The next morning, I found Sarah in the common room, sitting at a table with a half-completed jigsaw puzzle spread before her. She was mechanically placing pieces, her movements precise but somehow wrong, like watching someone perform an action they'd learned by rote rather than instinct. "Good morning, Sarah. How are you feeling?" She looked up at me with those vacant eyes. I am well. Thank you for asking. Her voice was flat, monotone. The subtle inflections that make speech human had been stripped away, leaving something that sounded more like a computer's speech synthesizer than a person. Do you remember our conversation when you first arrived? You told me about some research files you'd found. She tilted her head slightly, the gesture eerily mechanical. I do not recall. I am here for treatment of anxiety disorder. You mentioned being followed by men in suits. A long pause. I could almost see her searching through mental files that had been corrupted or deleted. I do not recall. My anxiety has improved significantly since beginning treatment. The exact phrasing Dr. Matthews had written in her chart, word for word. I tried a different approach. What's your favorite memory from childhood? Another pause, longer this time. I had a happy childhood. My parents were very supportive. Generic answers. Template responses. Like someone had programmed basic replies to common questions, but hadn't bothered to include actual memories or personality. Sarah, what did you study in graduate school? I studied psychology. I enjoyed learning about human behavior. Past tense. She was talking about her own life like it had happened to someone else. Over the next few days, I began testing other patients who'd been through room 7. The results were consistent and terrifying. Rebecca Walsh, who'd been admitted for anxiety 3 weeks ago, could no longer remember why she'd been anxious. David Kumar had no recollection of the depression that had brought him here. Maria Santos couldn't explain what had caused her panic attacks. But it wasn't just the symptoms that had been erased. They'd lost pieces of themselves. Rebecca had been an amateur painter before admission, but now she stared at art supplies with confusion. David had mentioned loving jazz music during intake, but when I played some during recreational time, he showed no interest. Maria had been fluent in Spanish, but when her sister visited and spoke to her in their native language, Maria responded only in English, claiming not to understand. The most disturbing part was the medication changes. After each room 7 session, patients were prescribed cocktails of drugs I'd never seen in psychiatric treatment. When I looked them up in our pharmaceutical database, most didn't exist. The few that did were experimental compounds, not approved, for civilian use. I cornered Kelly Rodriguez during our lunch break. She'd been a psychiatric nurse for 23 years, and had seen everything the human mind could produce in terms of breakdown and recovery. Kelly, have you noticed the behavioral changes in the Tuesday patients? She glanced around the break room, then moved closer to my table. Keep your voice down, Jake. And yes, I've noticed. This isn't normal psychiatric treatment, is it? Nothing about Dr. Matthews's methods is normal. I've worked with dozens of psychiatrists over the years. Never seen anything like what he's doing. She pulled out her phone and showed me a notes app with dates and patient names. I've been documenting changes too. Memory loss, personality shifts, loss of acquired skills. Why haven't you reported it? To who? Dr. Matthews reports directly to Director Carson. She approves his methods. The State Oversight Committee gets glowing reports about our success rates in patient compliance. Kelly's voice dropped to a whisper. 3 nurses have been fired in the past year for asking too many questions about room 7. One of them, Jennifer Walsh, tried to contact the state medical board. She had a suspicious car accident 2 weeks later. My blood went cold. Accident, brake, failure on a perfectly maintained vehicle. She survived, but barely. Now she works at a grocery store and won't talk about what happened here. That afternoon, I checked the personnel files I could access. Jennifer Walsh's termination was listed as violation of patient confidentiality protocols. No details. Clean and simple. I realized then that whatever was happening in room 7 wasn't just about the patients. It was about maintaining absolute silence about procedures that would horrify anyone with medical ethics. The memory modification wasn't just being performed on people with mental illness. It was being used to ensure no one would ever be able to testify about what they'd witnessed. The maintenance panel was hidden behind a supply cart that hadn't been moved in months. I'd walked past it hundreds of times without noticing the small access door built into the wall, but when I was searching for cleaning supplies after hours, I saw the panel's edge protruding slightly, as if someone had recently opened it and hadn't sealed it properly. Inside was a narrow crawl space that ran along the interior walls. The air was stale and thick with dust, but I could see light filtering through a small opening about 10 feet ahead. I squeezed through the tight space, my uniform catching on exposed pipes and electrical conduits. The light came from a observation window that looked directly into room 7. What I saw through that window made my hands shake so violently, I nearly fell backward into the crawl space. The room was nothing like any therapy space I'd ever seen. Instead of comfortable chairs and soft lighting, it looked like a cross between an operating room and a laboratory. A patient was strapped to what looked like a dental chair, but modified with restraints for arms, legs, and head. Electrodes were attached to his scalp, connected to machines that hummed with electronic energy. Multiple monitors displayed brainwave patterns, vital signs, and what looked like three-dimensional maps of neural activity. Dr. Matthews stood beside the chair, wearing surgical scrubs instead of his usual white coat, but he wasn't alone. 2 other people in lab coats worked at computer terminals, monitoring the data streaming across their screens. One was a woman I didn't recognize, with short blonde hair and government identification hanging from her neck. The other was a man in his 50s, taking notes on a tablet. The patient in the chair was Michael Torres, admitted 2 days ago for mild PTSD. His eyes were open, but his expression was blank, almost catatonic. Dr. Matthews was speaking to him, in a calm, measured voice. "Michael, I want you to think about the car accident that brought you here. I see it clearly. The impact, the blood, my wife screaming. Now I want you to imagine that accident never happened. Your wife is safe. She's at home, waiting for you." The brain activity monitors showed dramatic changes as Dr. Matthews spoke. Entire sections of neural activity were fluctuating, dimming, then disappearing entirely. "Tell me about your wife, Michael." A long pause. I don't have a wife." "That's right? You're single? You've always been single?" "Yes, I've always been single." The woman at the computer terminal looked up. Memory pathways successfully severed. Target trauma completely isolated. Excellent. Dr. Matthews made notes on his chart. Begin personality reconstruction sequence. The man with the tablet approached the chair. Subject shows optimal responsiveness. Recommend proceeding to advanced conditioning protocols. I watched in horror as they systematically dismantled Michael's memories, replacing genuine experiences with artificial constructs. They weren't treating mental illness. They were performing surgical alterations on human consciousness, cutting away pieces of people's lives like unwanted tumors. The equipment was military grade, far beyond anything a civilian psychiatric facility could afford or legally obtain. The computers displayed classification labels I recognized from my brief stint in the Army: confidential and authorized personnel only. This wasn't therapy. This was weapons research. After 2 hours they began disconnecting the electrodes. Michael sat up slowly, his movements precise and robotic. Dr. Matthews handed him a glass of water. "How do you feel, Michael?" "I feel excellent. Much better. Thank you for helping me." The same flat, emotionless tone I'd heard from every Tuesday. Patient, as they prepared to move him back to his room. The blonde woman looked directly at the observation window. For a moment, I thought she'd seen me, but she turned back to her computer without alarm. I squeezed back through the crawl space, my mind racing. What I'd witnessed wasn't just illegal. It was an atrocity that violated every principle of medical ethics and human rights. But I also knew that if Dr. Matthews and his team discovered I'd seen their work, I would become their next subject. Kelly Rodriguez found me in the supply closet at 4:30 a.m. still shaking from what I'd witnessed in room 7. She pulled me deeper into the storage area, between shelves of medical supplies, and pressed her finger to her lips. "We can't talk here," she whispered, glancing toward the door. "Too many cameras. Follow me." She led me through a series of back corridors I'd never seen before, past maintenance areas and storage rooms, until we reached a small break room in the basement that smelled of cigarettes and industrial disinfectant. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, and water dripped from exposed pipes in the ceiling. "This room isn't monitored," she said, closing the door behind us. I checked the security system blueprints. No cameras, no audio recording. "Kelly, I saw them. In room 7. They're not treating people. They're experimenting on them." Her face went pale. "You found the observation window. You know about it." "I've known about a lot of things for the past 18 months. Too much." She sat down heavily on a folding chair. "Jake, what you saw tonight is just the beginning. Dr. Matthews isn't working alone. And this isn't just about Clearwater." She pulled out her phone and showed me photographs. Pictures of government vehicles in the parking lot. Men in suits entering through service entrances. Official documents with Department of Defense seals. The program is called Project Mindbridge. It's a joint operation between DoD and a private defense contractor called Cognitive Solutions, Inc. They're developing memory modification techniques for military applications. Military applications. Think about it. Soldiers with PTSD who can have their trauma surgically removed. Prisoners of war who can have sensitive information erased before release. Enemy combatants who can be reprogrammed to provide intelligence. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "They're not just changing memories, Jake. They're rewriting human personalities." I thought about Sarah Chen, about her knowledge of similar research files. Sarah knew about this. That's why they brought her here. Sarah Chen was a mistake. She stumbled onto classified research at the university. But instead of having her disappear quietly, someone decided she'd make a perfect test subject. Kelly's hands trembled as she scrolled through more photos. "They've been recruiting from multiple facilities, mental health patients, prison inmates, homeless individuals. People society won't miss." "How long have you known?" I started noticing patterns 6 months after Dr. Matthews arrived. Patients who came in with one set of problems and left with completely different personalities. Medication cocktails that didn't match any standard psychiatric treatments. She showed me a list of names. 43 people have gone through room 7 in the past year and a half. Only 12 are still alive. My stomach dropped. What happened to the others? Complications during the procedure. Massive brain hemorrhages, complete personality dissolution, catatonic states that required life support. She put her phone away. The ones who died are listed as suicides or medical emergencies. Clean paperwork. No questions asked. "Why haven't you gone to the authorities?" Kelly laughed bitterly. "I tried. 3 times. The first investigator I contacted told me there was insufficient evidence. The second said the allegations were too extraordinary to pursue without federal oversight. The third one died in a skiing accident 2 days after our meeting. We have to do something. We have to survive this, Jake. I'm 6 months from retirement. If I can make it that long, I can disappear quietly and try to forget what I've seen." She grabbed my arm. "But you're young. You have decades of work ahead of you. If you keep digging, they'll notice. They're destroying people's minds. We can't just ignore it. Look what happened to Jennifer Walsh. Look what happened to Marcus Webb." She pulled out a newspaper clipping. Marcus was supposed to testify about his experiences at a congressional hearing next month. Now he's dead, and his testimony died with him. I stared at the headline about Marcus's car accident. "How do you know he was going to testify?" "Because he contacted me 2 weeks ago. He'd recovered some of his memories after the procedures wore off. Partial recall, but enough to understand what had been done to him." Kelly's eyes filled with tears. He remembered fragments of his wife, his children, pieces of the life they'd erased. He was desperate to get his family back. What did you tell him? I told him to run, to disappear, and never look back. But he wouldn't listen. He thought he could expose the program and save other people from going through what he'd experienced. She stood up and moved toward the door. I'm telling you the same thing, Jake. Walk away. Forget what you've seen. Transfer to another facility and never speak about room 7 again. What about the patients? What about Sarah? Kelly paused with her hand on the doorknob. Sarah Chen is gone, Jake. The woman in her body is just a biological machine programmed to look human. Whatever made her Sarah was erased Tuesday night. She opened the door and looked back at me one final time. Decide what's more important to you, trying to save people who can't be saved, or staying alive long enough to prevent this from happening to others. After she left, I sat alone in that flickering basement room, knowing that my next choice would determine whether I lived or died. Dr. Matthews's office was on the 3rd floor, accessible only with administrative keycards. But Kelly had taught me that every security system has flaws if you know where to look. The maintenance staff used universal cards that opened most doors, and Tommy Valdez, who worked the night cleaning crew, had a habit of leaving his card clipped to his belt while he went outside to smoke. I waited until 5 a.m., when Tommy took his regular cigarette break, then slipped his card from his cleaning cart. The elevator ride to the 3rd floor felt like descending into hell. Each floor number lit up with a soft chime that seemed loud enough to wake the entire building. Dr. Matthews's office was at the end of a long hallway lined with portraits of former medical directors. Their painted eyes seemed to follow me as I walked past, my soft-soled shoes squeaking against the polished linoleum. The key card worked on the first try. The door opened into an office that looked more like a military briefing room than a doctor's workspace. Multiple computer monitors displayed brain scan images and neural mapping data. Filing cabinets lined the walls, each drawer labeled with codes rather than names. I started with his desk. The top drawer contained standard office supplies, but underneath was a locked metal box. The second drawer held patient files, but not the sanitized versions from our main database. These files contained detailed notes about memory modification procedures, success rates, and what Dr. Matthews called acceptable casualty percentages. The bottom drawer held government documents. Project Mindbridge was funded through a black budget allocation from the Department of Defense, administered through a shell organization called the Behavioral Research Initiative. The program's stated goal was developing reversible memory modification techniques for military psychological operations and enhanced interrogation protocols. But the real scope was far more ambitious. According to the files, they weren't just targeting traumatic memories. They were working on complete personality reconstruction, creating what the documents called compliant civilian assets, who could be programmed for specific tasks while retaining normal cognitive function in other areas. Sarah Chen's file was thick with pre-admission surveillance reports. They'd been monitoring her for 3 weeks before her admission, documenting her daily routines, her academic work, her social interactions. The decision to bring her to Clearwater hadn't been made by any psychiatrist. It had been made by someone with the authority to override normal legal procedures. Her crime wasn't mental illness. Her crime was curiosity. The surveillance reports showed that agents had contacted her roommate, her professors, and her family members, using what they called memory adjustment consultations to ensure no one would corroborate her claims about the research files she'd discovered. Everyone who might have supported her story had been subjected to mild versions of the same procedures that would later be used on her. I photographed every document I could find, my phone's camera clicking softly in the darkness. Financial records showed payments from Cognitive Solutions, Inc., totaling over $12 million in the past 18 months. Personnel files listed the blonde woman I'd seen in room 7 as Dr. Amanda Foster, a neuroscientist with top secret clearance, and specializations in cognitive restructuring and behavioral modification. The most disturbing files were the expansion plans. Clearwater was just the pilot program. Similar facilities were being established in 12 other states, targeting different patient populations, prison systems, homeless shelters, veteran hospitals. Even some university psychology departments were being infiltrated by Project Mindbridge operatives. They weren't just experimenting on mental health patients anymore. They were building an infrastructure to modify the memories and personalities of anyone who posed a threat to classified operations. In the locked metal box, I found Dr. Matthews's personal notes about individual cases. His handwriting was precise, clinical, devoid of any recognition that he was describing human beings. Subject 23 Sarah Chen showed exceptional resistance to initial conditioning, required 3 additional sessions to achieve complete memory integration. Recommend increasing electrical stimulation protocols for similar subjects. Subject 31 Michael Torres experienced minor bleeding during hippocampus targeting. Memory erasure successful, but subject exhibits occasional personality fragments from pre-modification period. Consider this acceptable within operational parameters. Subject 19 Rebecca Walsh achieved perfect compliance after 2 sessions. No residual memories detected. Recommend this subject for advanced programming protocols. At the bottom of the box was a list of upcoming subjects. Names I recognized from our current patient population, scheduled for room 7 sessions over the next month. 23 people who had no idea they were about to lose everything that made them human. As I photographed the final documents, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy, measured steps that could only belong to security personnel making rounds. I quickly returned everything to its original position and moved toward the window, hoping I could claim I'd seen a light and was investigating a possible break dash. The footsteps passed by without stopping, but as I prepared to leave, I noticed one more file on Dr. Matthews's desk that I'd missed. A personnel evaluation with my name on the cover. Inside was a complete psychological profile, compiled from my employment records, security background, checks and what appeared to be surveillance reports, dating back 3 months. They knew about my questions regarding patient treatments. They knew about my conversations with Kelly Rodriguez. They knew I'd been documenting the Tuesday pattern. At the bottom of my file was a single, handwritten note: potential security risk. Recommend close monitoring and possible intervention if questioning continues. I was already on their list. The only question was whether I'd become their next patient or their next casualty. The call came at 2:15 a.m. on a Friday night. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the files I'd photographed, when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Is this Jake Thompson? The voice was male, nervous, speaking just above a whisper. Who is this? My name is Marcus Webb. Kelly Rodriguez gave me your number. She said you work at Clearwater and that you've been asking questions about room 7. I sat up in bed. Marcus Webb was the former patient Kelly had mentioned, the one who'd supposedly recovered fragments of his memories. According to the newspaper, he'd died in a car accident 3 days ago. Marcus, I thought you were dead. That's what they want everyone to think. The car accident was staged. I barely escaped. His breathing was rapid, panicked. I need to meet with you tonight. There are things you need to know about what they're doing in that room. Where are you? Denny's on Route 47, about 20 miles north of town. Come alone. If you bring anyone, or if you're being followed, I'll disappear and you'll never see me again. The drive took 30 minutes through empty back roads. Denny's sat like an island of fluorescent light in the darkness, its parking lot nearly empty, except for a few long-haul truckers grabbing coffee. I found Marcus in a back booth, hunched over a cup of coffee with his baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He was thinner than his patient photo, with hollow cheeks and dark circles under his eyes. But what struck me most were the scars. Thin lines behind his hairline, barely visible, unless you knew to look for them. Surgical scars. Thank you for coming. His hands shook as he lifted his coffee cup. I wasn't sure you'd believe I was alive. How? Did you fake your death? I didn't fake it. They tried to kill me. He pushed up his sleeves, revealing more scars along his forearms. The car accident was supposed to be fatal. Brake lines cut, steering disabled. I survived because I'd been paranoid enough to modify my own vehicle with backup systems. Why are they trying to kill you? Marcus pulled out a small digital recorder. Because of what I remembered, and because of what I was planning to do with those memories. He pressed play. His own voice filled the space between us, but it sounded different, more confident, more alive. My name is Marcus Webb. I was a patient at Clearwater Mental Health from September 15th to October 30th last year. I was admitted for mild depression following my divorce. What they did to me there was not medical treatment. It was torture. The recording continued for 20 minutes. Marcus described being taken to room 7, strapped to the chair, subjected to electrical stimulation that felt like having his brain torn apart and rebuilt. He talked about watching his memories dissolve on computer screens, while strangers in lab coats discussed his personality like it was a software program that needed debugging. They erased my marriage. The recorded Marcus said, 15 years with my wife, gone. My children's faces, their voices, their birthdays, all deleted. They replaced those memories with artificial constructs. Made me believe I'd always been single, that I'd never wanted a family. The recording stopped. Present-day Marcus wiped tears from his eyes. It took 8 months for fragments to start coming back. Dreams, mostly. Images that didn't fit with the artificial memories they'd implanted. A woman's laugh. Children calling me daddy. The smell of my wife's perfume. How did you piece it together? I hired a private investigator to look into my own life. Found marriage certificates, birth records for my children, photographs they missed when they sanitized my apartment. He pulled out a wallet-sized photo of 2 young children. My daughter Emma is 7. My son David is 4. They think their father died in a car accident, because that's what my wife was told when I disappeared. Your wife thinks you're dead. The official story is that Marcus Webb committed suicide during psychiatric treatment. My body was supposedly cremated, per my wishes. Clean, simple, no questions asked. He put the photo away. My family has been mourning a ghost, while the real me was programmed to believe they never existed. What were you planning to do with the recording? Testify before a congressional oversight committee. I had a meeting scheduled with Senator Patricia Vance, who chairs the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee. She was investigating reports of illegal human experimentation in military research programs. Marcus pulled out a business card with official Senate letterhead. Senator Vance's office confirmed the hearing was set for next Tuesday. My testimony would have been entered into the congressional record, protected under whistleblower statutes. They tried to kill you to stop the hearing. They succeeded in stopping it. Without my testimony, Senator Vance doesn't have enough evidence to proceed with a formal investigation. The program continues, and more people like Sarah Chen get erased. He leaned forward across the table. But there's still a chance. If someone with current access to the facility can provide documentation, someone who can corroborate my story, with fresh evidence, the senator might reconsider. You want me to testify? I want you to gather proof. Real evidence that can't be dismissed as the fantasies of a mentally ill former patient. He handed me a secure phone. This connects directly to Senator Vance's office. When you have something concrete, call that number. What about you? Where will you go? Marcus stood up, pulling his cap down over his eyes. Somewhere they can't find me. Somewhere I can try to remember what it felt like to be a father. As he walked toward the exit, he turned back one final time. Jake, be careful. They're not just monitoring the facility. They're monitoring everyone who works there. If they suspect you know too much, you won't get a car accident. You'll just become their next patient. After he left, I sat alone in that fluorescent-lit diner, holding the secure phone, and knowing that I'd just agreed to risk everything for people I might never be able to save. But Marcus was right about one thing. Without proof, without testimony, the program would continue expanding until no one's memories were safe. The news broke during the morning shift change. I was in the break room, exhausted from my meeting with Marcus, and trying to process everything he'd told me, when the television caught my attention. Local man dies in tragic highway accident. Marcus Webb, 34, was killed when his vehicle left Route 47 and struck a concrete barrier at approximately 4:30 a.m. Police report that weather conditions and driver fatigue may have contributed to the crash. The news footage showed a mangled sedan wrapped around a highway guardrail, emergency vehicles with flashing lights, and a body bag being loaded into a coroner's van. Everything looked authentic, professional, exactly like a real accident scene, except I'd been talking to Marcus Webb at 4:30 a.m. He'd been alive, walking out of Denny's to disappear into whatever safe haven he'd arranged for himself. Terrible tragedy, a voice said behind me. I turned to find Dr. Matthews standing in the doorway, holding a cup of coffee and watching the news coverage with what appeared to be genuine sadness. "Did you know him?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Marcus was one of my patients last year. Severe depression following his divorce. I'm afraid the treatment wasn't entirely successful." He shook his head slowly. "Sometimes patients leave here with unresolved issues that manifest in self-destructive behavior." The news said it was an accident. Officially, yes. But those of us in the psychiatric community recognized the signs. Marcus had been struggling with suicidal ideation since his discharge. This was probably inevitable. Dr. Matthews moved closer to the television, studying the accident footage. "It's a reminder of how important our work here is. When we can successfully treat patients like Sarah Chen and Michael Torres, we prevent tragedies like this from occurring." The way he said their names, with a slight emphasis that suggested ownership rather than care, made my skin crawl. He wasn't mourning Marcus's death. He was satisfied by it. "I should check on the mourning patients," I said, heading toward the door. "Jake, wait a moment." Dr. Matthews set down his coffee cup. "I've been reviewing your performance evaluations. Helen Carson speaks very highly of your dedication and attention to detail. Thank you. She also mentioned that you've been asking thoughtful questions about our treatment protocols. That kind of intellectual curiosity is exactly what we need in dedicated staff members." There was something in his tone that made me pause. Not praise, but evaluation, like he was studying my reactions to determine something important. "I'm always interested in learning new approaches to patient care." "Excellent. I'd like to offer you an opportunity for advancement. We're expanding our therapeutic programs and need orderlies who can assist with specialized treatments. The work would involve some evening hours, but the compensation would be substantial." "What kind of specialized treatments?" "Cutting-edge therapies for patients with severe memory-related disorders, PTSD, traumatic amnesia, that sort of thing. You'd be working directly with our most challenging cases." The room felt suddenly cold. Dr. Matthews was offering me a position working in room 7, bringing me inside the program rather than allowing me to remain a potential threat on the outside. I'd need to think about it, of course, but don't take too long. Opportunities like this don't remain open indefinitely. His smile was warm and professional, but his eyes remained calculating. "In fact, I'd recommend making a decision within the next few days. We're planning some significant changes to our staffing structure." After he left, I sat alone in the break room, watching the Marcus Webb story cycle through the news rotation. Each broadcast added more details about his troubled mental state, his history of depression, his recent erratic behavior that concerned friends and family. None of it was true, but by evening it would be accepted fact. Marcus Webb would be remembered as a tragic suicide case, not as a whistleblower who'd tried to expose government atrocities, and Dr. Matthews's offer wasn't a promotion. It was a test. He wanted to see if I could be recruited into the program or if I needed to be neutralized, like Marcus. Either way, I had perhaps 48 hours before they made their final decision about my fate. Sarah was scheduled for her third session on Tuesday night. I found her in the common room that afternoon, sitting in the same chair she'd occupied every day since her first treatment, staring at the blank television screen with those vacant eyes. But something was different. Her hands were trembling slightly, and when I looked closer, I could see a thin line of blood trickling from her left nostril. "Sarah, are you feeling all right?" She turned toward me with mechanical precision, but her response was delayed, like a computer struggling to process a simple command. "I feel fine. Thank you for your concern." Her speech was even flatter than before, but now it carried an odd quality, as if the words were being transmitted from somewhere else, rather than originating in her own mind. "You have some blood on your face." She touched her nose, looked at her fingers, then wiped the blood away, without any apparent concern or curiosity about its source. "I am well. The treatments have been very helpful." During dinner, she suffered what appeared to be a minor seizure. Her body went rigid for about 30 seconds, her eyes rolled back, and she made a low humming sound that reminded me of the electronic equipment in room 7. When it passed, she continued eating as if nothing had happened. "Should I call Dr. Matthews?" asked Linda, one of the evening nurses. "No need," said Helen Carson, who'd appeared in the dining room during the episode. "Sarah is responding normally to her treatment program. These minor neurological events are expected during the adjustment. Period." But I could see the concern in Linda's eyes. In 15 years of psychiatric nursing, she'd never seen anything like what was happening to Sarah Chen that night. I positioned myself near the nurse's station to observe Sarah's third session. Dr. Matthews arrived promptly at 3 a.m., but this time he wasn't alone. Dr. Amanda Foster, the blonde woman from the observation window, accompanied him, along with the older man I'd seen taking notes. They had to physically assist Sarah to room 7. Her coordination had deteriorated significantly since her last treatment. She walked like someone learning to use prosthetic legs, each step requiring conscious thought and effort. Through the closed door, I could hear the electronic humming start almost immediately. But within 10 minutes, an alarm began sounding inside the room. Not the gentle beeping of monitoring equipment, but a sharp, urgent warning tone. Raised voices carried through the walls. Dr. Foster, shouting instructions. Equipment being moved rapidly. The sound of running water, as if someone was cleaning up a spill. The session lasted only 45 minutes instead of the usual 2 hours. When the door opened, Dr. Matthews emerged first, his surgical scrubs stained with what looked like blood. Dr. Foster followed, stripping off latex gloves and dropping them into a medical waste container. The older man wheeled out a cart loaded with electronic equipment, moving quickly toward the service elevator. Sarah didn't come out for another 20 minutes. When she finally appeared, she needed physical support from both Dr. Matthews and Dr. Foster. Her gait was even more mechanical than before, and there was fresh blood seeping through bandages behind both ears. They took her directly to the medical wing rather than back to her room. The next morning, Sarah was listed as being treated for minor complications related to her therapy program, but when I tried to visit her in the medical wing, I was told that only authorized personnel were allowed access. Through the observation window in her medical room door, I could see her lying motionless on a hospital bed, connected to multiple monitoring devices. Her head was wrapped in surgical bandages, and a breathing tube had been inserted down her throat. Dr. Matthews found me standing in the hallway outside her room. "Jake, I understand you're concerned about Sarah's welfare. That's commendable, but I need to assure you that she's receiving the best possible care. What happened during her session?" Sarah experienced an adverse reaction to her treatment. Some patients have stronger neurological responses than others. We're monitoring her closely and adjusting her therapy accordingly. She's unconscious. She's sedated for her comfort while we evaluate her brain activity. The procedures we use can be temporarily disorienting, but the long-term benefits far outweigh any short-term discomfort. I looked through the window again. Sarah's monitors showed irregular brain waves, fluctuating blood pressure, and what appeared to be ongoing seizure activity. Dr. Matthews, I think she needs to be transferred to a real hospital. His expression hardened slightly. Jake, I appreciate your concern, but you need to trust my medical judgment. Sarah is exactly where she needs to be, receiving exactly the treatment that will help her recover. Recover from what? She was admitted for anxiety, and now she's being treated for the underlying neurological conditions that caused her anxiety. Conditions that required more aggressive intervention than initially anticipated. As he spoke, I watched Sarah's vital signs fluctuating wildly on the monitors. Whatever they'd done to her brain during the third session had caused massive damage. I'd like you to focus on your other patients, Jake. Sarah's care is no longer your responsibility. That afternoon, I overheard Dr. Foster talking to Helen Carson in the administrative offices. The subject isn't responding to standard recovery protocols. Extensive neural pathway damage, probable permanent cognitive impairment. Recommend terminating the experiment and disposing of the subject through standard channels. Standard channels? They were talking about killing Sarah Chen and covering it up as a medical complication, and I was the only person who knew she'd been a healthy graduate student just 2 weeks ago. I had 12 hours to make an impossible choice. Save evidence or save Sarah. I couldn't do both. The secure phone Marcus had given me sat on my kitchen table like an accusation. Senator Vance's office was expecting documentation that could bring down Project Mindbridge, potentially saving hundreds of future victims. But Sarah Chen was dying in a hospital bed, while Dr. Foster prepared what she called disposal through standard channels. At 6 p.m., I called the secure line. Senator Vance's office, Secure Communications. This is Jake Thompson. I have information about Project Mindbridge. Mr. Thompson, we've been expecting your call. The senator can meet with you tomorrow evening to review any evidence you've gathered. There's a problem. They're planning to kill one of the test subjects tonight, a woman named Sarah Chen. If I try to save her, I'll blow my cover and lose access to the facility. A long pause. Mr. Thompson, we understand the difficult position you're in, but without concrete evidence, we can't proceed with an investigation. That could shut down the entire program. So I let her die. We can't advise you on that decision, but we can tell you that dozens of people may suffer the same fate if this program continues operating. After I hung up, I sat in my apartment, staring at the photographs I'd taken of Dr. Matthews's files. 43 people had already gone through room 7. 23 were scheduled for upcoming sessions. The program was expanding to 12 other facilities across the country. Sarah was one person. The evidence could save hundreds, but Sarah was also the person who'd trusted me during her intake, who'd gripped my wrist and begged me to believe her when she said she was being stalked. She'd been right about everything, and now she was paying the price for her curiosity. At 10 p.m., I made my decision. I drove to Clearwater and used Tommy's keycard to access the medical wing. Sarah's room was guarded by a security officer who'd fallen asleep in his chair. I slipped past him and entered her room. Closing the door silently behind me, Sarah lay motionless under white sheets. Her breathing assisted by machines, her brain activity displayed on monitors that showed chaotic, irregular patterns. The bandages around her head were stained with fresh blood, and her skin had taken on a grayish pallor that suggested systemic organ failure. I checked her chart. According to Dr. Foster's notes, Sarah was scheduled for experimental termination at 6 a.m., listed as complications from severe psychiatric deterioration. Disconnecting her from the life support equipment would be mercy. Not murder, but it would. Also destroy the only living evidence of what Project Mindbridge was doing to its victims. As I stood beside her bed, Sarah's eyes suddenly opened, not the vacant stare I'd grown accustomed to, but something that looked almost like recognition. "Jake," she whispered, her voice barely audible through the breathing apparatus. "Sarah, can you hear me? They, took, everything." Each word was a struggle, forced out between mechanical breathing cycles. Ken single quotes, T, who? I was. "I'm going to get you out of here." "No." Her hand moved slightly, trying to reach toward me. "Two, late, brain, damaged, but, you, can, stop, them." "Sarah, I need you to stay alive. You're proof of what they're doing. Recording, device." Her eyes moved toward a small metal object on the bedside table that I'd assumed was medical equipment. Hidden, camera. Everything, documented. I picked up the device. It was a sophisticated recording system, disguised as a patient monitoring unit. The memory card contained hours of footage from inside room 7. How did you, graduate student, knew they were, watching, prepared, evidence. She struggled to take a breath. Memory, returning. In pieces. No, who I was. No, what they, stole. On the monitors, her brain activity began showing more regular patterns, as if the conversation was helping her regain some cognitive function. "Sarah, if I can get you medical help, to, much, damage, but, recording, will, save, others." Her hand found mine, gripping it with surprising strength. "Promise, me. Use, the, evidence, I promise. Thank, you, believing me." Her grip relaxed, and her eyes closed, The monitors continued, showing brain activity. But Sarah had retreated back into whatever remained of her consciousness. I took the recording device and slipped out of her room. The security guard was still asleep, and the hallways were empty. But as I reached the exit, I heard footsteps behind me. Going somewhere. "Jake." I turned to find Dr. Matthews standing at the end of the hallway, flanked by 2 security officers I didn't recognize. They were dressed in civilian clothes but carried themselves like military personnel. I was checking on Sarah Chen, at midnight, without authorization. He walked closer, his footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. "Jake, I think we need to have a conversation about your recent activities." The recording device felt heavy in my pocket, evidence that could bring down the entire program, or my death sentence if they discovered it. "I've decided to accept your job offer," I said, "working with the specialized treatment program. I want to be part of what you're doing here." Dr. Matthews smiled, but his eyes remained cold and calculating. "Excellent. Your first shift starts now." Dr. Matthews led me to the administrative wing, past offices I'd never been allowed to enter. The security officers flanked us, their presence making it clear this wasn't a job interview, but an interrogation. Helen Carson was waiting in her office, sitting behind a mahogany desk that looked more appropriate for a corporate boardroom than a mental health facility. Financial documents were spread across the surface, and I could see government seals and classified markings on several pages. "Jake, please sit down." Her voice was calm, professional, but carried an undertone of authority I'd never heard before. "Dr. Matthews tells me you're interested in joining our specialized treatment team." "That's right. Before we proceed, I need to understand your level of commitment to this facility and to the important work we're doing here." She picked up a thick folder with my name on the cover. "Your personnel file shows exemplary performance, but also indicates you've been asking questions about our treatment protocols. I'm curious about new therapeutic approaches. Curiosity is valuable, Jake, but so is discretion." The treatments we provide here are part of a larger research initiative that requires absolute confidentiality. She opened the folder and pulled out photographs. Pictures of me entering Dr. Matthews's office. Images of me talking with Kelly Rodriguez in secluded areas of the facility. Screenshots of me taking photos with my phone. We monitor all areas of this facility, Jake. All areas. All times. My blood went cold, but I tried to maintain composure. I was documenting patient care concerns. You were conducting unauthorized surveillance of classified medical procedures. Helen stood and walked around the desk, positioning herself directly in front of me. The question now is whether you can be trusted with the truth, or whether you represent a security risk that needs to be managed. Dr. Matthews moved closer. Helen, I believe Jake has the potential to be a valuable asset. His background shows exactly the kind of dedication we need for this program. Perhaps. But first we need to ensure his complete understanding of what's at stake here. She pressed a button on her desk, and a wall-mounted screen descended from the ceiling. Jake, what I'm about to show you is classified at the highest levels of government. Sharing this information with unauthorized personnel is a federal crime punishable by life imprisonment. The screen displayed a PowerPoint presentation with Department of Defense logos and security classifications. The title read, Project Mind Bridge, Cognitive Warfare Applications and Strategic Implementation. The treatments we provide here aren't experimental, Jake. They're operational. We've perfected memory modification techniques that allow us to create what we call cognitive assets. Individuals who can be programmed for specific tasks while maintaining normal psychological profiles. The presentation showed brain scan images, success rates, and deployment statistics. According to the data, Project MindBridge had already processed over 300 subjects across multiple facilities. Military applications are obvious. Soldiers, who can have traumatic memories erased while retaining combat training. Deep cover operatives, who genuinely believe their fabricated identities. Prisoners of war, who can be reprogrammed to provide intelligence voluntarily. She clicked to the next slide, showing civilian applications, but the real value is in domestic operations. Corporate whistleblowers who forget what they discovered. Journalists who lose interest in sensitive stories. Politicians who change their positions on inconvenient policies. Helen looked directly at me. Citizens who become more compliant, more trusting, more manageable. You're talking about mind control. We're talking about social stability, Jake. American society is increasingly fragmented, increasingly difficult to govern effectively. Project MindBridge offers tools to reduce that fragmentation. Dr. Matthews pulled up another slide showing financial data, payments from multiple government agencies, defense contractors, and what appeared to be private corporations. The program generates substantial revenue for participating facilities. Clearwater has received over $40 million in the past 2 years. Staff members who join the specialized treatment team receive compensation packages that reflect the sensitive nature of their work. Helen returned to her desk and pulled out a contract. Starting salary of $200,000 annually, plus benefits and security clearances that will open career opportunities throughout the defense industry. I stared at the numbers on the page. More money than I'd make in 5 years. As a regular orderly, what would my responsibilities be? Patient preparation, procedure monitoring, post-treatment observation. You'd work closely with Dr. Matthews and Dr. Foster to ensure optimal results from our therapeutic interventions. And if I decline, the room fell silent. Helen and Dr. Matthews exchanged glances, communicating something without words. Jake, people who are offered this opportunity don't typically decline. The work we're doing here is too important, too sensitive, to allow security risks to remain unaddressed. You'd have me committed. We'd have you treated, Dr. Matthews said gently. The same procedures we use on our patients would help you understand why this program is necessary. You'd lose your concerns about our methods, but you'd retain your skills and your dedication to helping people. They weren't offering me a job. They were giving me a choice between becoming complicit in their atrocities or becoming their next victim. I looked at the contract again, thinking about Sarah Chen lying in that hospital bed with her brain destroyed, about Marcus Webb hiding somewhere with fragments of memories they'd tried to erase, about the 23 patients scheduled for upcoming sessions. I'll need some time to consider this offer, of course. Helen's smile was cold. Take all the time you need, but I should mention that we're implementing some security upgrades tonight. New access restrictions, enhanced monitoring systems. After tonight, it may be more difficult for staff members to move freely through the facility. The message was clear. This was my last chance to gather evidence, my final opportunity to expose Project Mindbridge before they locked down the facility completely. I understand. Excellent. Security will escort you to your vehicle. We look forward to your decision, Jake. As I walked toward the parking lot, flanked by the two officers, I realized that Helen Carson and Dr. Matthews had made a critical mistake. They'd shown me the full scope of their operation, believing it would convince me to join them. Instead, they'd given me everything I needed to destroy them. I drove home with security following me, their black sedan maintaining a careful distance. They parked across from my apartment building and settled in for surveillance, making it clear that I was now a prisoner in everything but name. In my apartment, I connected Sarah's recording device to my laptop. The footage was devastating. Hours of procedures showing patients being strapped down, electrodes attached to their skulls, their memories systematically destroyed while doctors took notes like they were debugging computer software. Sarah had been recording for weeks before her admission, documenting not just the procedures but the preparation. Government officials touring the facility, military personnel delivering equipment, financial transactions that showed the true scope of Project Mindbridge's funding. The most damning footage was from her own sessions. I watched in horror as Dr. Matthews and Dr. Foster dismantled her memories, erasing her identity piece by piece, while she screamed for them to stop. The final session showed her brain hemorrhaging on the monitors while they continued the procedure, determined to complete their experiment regardless of the damage. At 3 a.m., my phone rang, the same number Dr. Matthews had called from earlier. Jake, I hope you've had time to consider our offer. I have. Excellent. Can you meet us at the facility? We'd like to finalize your employment paperwork tonight. I'll be there in 30 minutes. I made copies of Sarah's recordings and uploaded them to multiple cloud storage accounts. Then I armed the secure phone Marcus had given me and called Senator Vance's office. This is Jake Thompson. I have the evidence you requested, but I need FEDERAL protection immediately. They're trying to recruit me tonight, and if I refuse, I'll become their next patient. Mr. Thompson, how solid is your evidence? Video recordings of the procedures, financial documents showing government funding, patient files documenting memory modification experiments, everything you need to shut them down. We're dispatching federal marshals to your location. Can you delay the meeting until they arrive? No. If I don't show up, they'll know something's wrong. The evidence is uploaded to secure servers. If anything happens to me, you'll still have everything you need. Mr. Thompson, this is extremely dangerous. People are dying. Tonight, they're going to kill Sarah Chen to cover up what they did to her brain. If I don't try to stop them now, she won't be the last. The drive to Clearwater felt like a funeral procession. The security sedan followed me through empty streets, their headlights reflecting in my rearview mirror like the eyes of predators, tracking wounded prey. Dr. Matthews was waiting in the lobby with Dr. Foster and Helen Carson. All three were dressed in business attire rather than medical clothing, suggesting this meeting was about much more than employment paperwork. Jake, thank you for coming. I trust you've made your decision. I want to join the program. Helen smiled and led us toward the elevator. I'm pleased to hear that. Your first assignment will be assisting with a procedure scheduled for this evening. What kind of procedure? Sarah Chen's final treatment. She's suffered some complications from her therapy, and we need to implement a more permanent solution. The elevator rose to the 3rd floor, but instead of going to Helen's office, we walked toward room 7. The hallway was busier than I'd ever seen it, with technicians wheeling equipment and government officials I didn't recognize reviewing paperwork. Jake, Dr. Matthews said as we approached the room, before we proceed with your orientation, I need you to surrender any electronic devices. Security protocols require that all recording equipment be secured during classified procedures. They knew, somehow, despite all their surveillance, they'd discovered that I had evidence of their operations. I don't have any recording equipment. Dr. Foster pulled out a handheld scanning device and ran it over my clothing. It immediately detected Sarah's recording unit in my jacket pocket. Jake, I'm disappointed. We'd hoped you could be trusted with the truth, but it appears you've been conducting unauthorized documentation of our work. Helen Carson stepped forward, flanked by security officers. Mr. Thompson, you have 2 choices. You can join our program voluntarily and help us with Sarah Chen's final procedure, or you can become a patient yourself and experience firsthand the treatments you've been so curious about. Through the open door of room 7, I could see Sarah, strapped to the table, unconscious but alive. Monitors showed weak but steady vital signs. She was still fighting, still clinging to whatever fragments of identity remained in her damaged brain. What's it going to be, Jake? Dr. Matthews asked. Partner or patient? I looked at the faces surrounding me. Government officials, military, personnel, medical professionals who'd abandoned every ethical principle they'd ever learned. All of them waiting to see if I would become complicit in their atrocities, or if I would join their victims. I choose neither. The security officers moved toward me, but I was already reaching for the second device hidden in my shoe. Not another recording unit, but a live transmission beacon that had been broadcasting everything to Senator Vance's office since I'd entered the building. Jake, what are you doing? Dr. Matthews demanded. Something I should have done weeks ago. I held up the transmitter so everyone could see it. Every word you've said tonight has been recorded and transmitted to federal authorities. Senator Patricia Vance and her oversight committee are listening to this conversation in real time. Helen Carson's face went white. That's impossible. Our security systems would have detected any transmission equipment. Your security systems are designed to detect standard recording devices, not military-grade communication equipment provided by congressional investigators. I kept the transmitter, held high, like a talisman protecting me from the people surrounding us. Senator Vance, if you can hear this, I'm standing in room 7 at Clearwater Mental Health with Dr. James Matthews, Dr. Amanda Foster, and Director Helen Carson. Sarah Chen is strapped to a table, and they're preparing to kill her to cover up their experiments. Dr. Foster grabbed the transmitter from my hand and threw it to the floor, crushing it under her heel. But the damage was done. Federal authorities now had real-time confirmation of everything I'd been reporting. You have no idea what you've done, Helen said, her composure finally cracking. This program is vital to national security. You've compromised operations that protect American lives. I've exposed war crimes being committed against American citizens. Dr. Matthews moved closer, his medical facade dropping completely. Jake, you don't understand the bigger picture. The people we treat here are security risks. Sarah Chen discovered classified research that could compromise military operations. Marcus Webb was planning to testify about techniques that need to remain secret. These individuals pose threats to national security, so you destroy their minds. We neutralize threats while preserving their lives. It's more humane than the alternatives being murder. The alternatives being whatever methods are necessary to protect classified information. Through the observation window, I could see Sarah stirring on the table. The conversation had somehow reached her unconscious mind, and she was trying to wake up, trying to fight against the restraints that held her down. Dr. Foster noticed the movement on the monitors. We need to proceed with the final procedure immediately. If she regains consciousness, she might remember fragments of what she's overheard. No. I stepped between them and the door to room 7. Sarah Chen is not going to die tonight. Jake, step aside. You're interfering with a classified operation. I'm preventing a murder. The security officers moved toward me, but before they could reach me, alarms began sounding throughout the building. Emergency lighting activated, bathing the hallway in red strobes that made everything look like a scene from hell. Federal agents are entering the building, a voice announced over the intercom. All personnel remain in place and prepare for facility lockdown. Helen Carson grabbed her phone and started making rapid calls. We need immediate document destruction in all administrative areas. Initiate data purge protocols for all computer systems. Dr. Matthews was already moving toward room 7. If we're going to complete the Chen procedure, it has to be now. Stop. I blocked the doorway again. Federal agents are in the building. If you kill her now, you'll be committing murder. In front of federal witnesses, we'll be preventing the compromise of a classified program. Dr. Foster pushed past me and began preparing the equipment in room 7. The electronic humming started, building to the same deadly frequency I'd heard during Sarah's previous sessions. Sarah's eyes opened. She saw me standing in the doorway and managed to speak despite the breathing apparatus. Jake, help, me, I'm trying, Sarah. Federal agents are here. You're going to be safe. Dr. Matthews activated the restraint system, securing Sarah's head so she couldn't move during the final procedure. Jake, if you care about this woman's welfare, you'll let us complete her treatment. The brain damage she suffered will leave her in a vegetative state. We're providing a humane end to her suffering. You're covering up your crimes. We're completing necessary medical intervention. The sound of boots echoed from the stairwells. Federal agents were moving through the building, searching for room 7 and the evidence of Project Mindbridge's operations. Dr. Foster looked up from her equipment. 30 seconds to complete the procedure. Her brain activity will cease, and the death will appear natural. I looked at Sarah, strapped to the table with electrodes attached to her skull, her eyes pleading with me to save her from the monsters who'd already destroyed most of her mind. The federal agents were getting closer, but they wouldn't reach us. In time, Sarah Chen was going to die, unless I did something to stop them right now. I lunged toward the main power control panel for room 7, slamming my hand down on the emergency shutdown switch. The electronic humming died instantly, and the monitors went dark. Jake, step away from that panel. Dr. Matthews grabbed my arm, but I twisted free and pulled the main power cables from their connections. Sarah, can you hear me? The agents are almost here. You're going to be okay. But even as I spoke, I could see her vital signs deteriorating on the battery-powered backup monitors. The damage from her previous sessions was too severe. Her brain was shutting down regardless of what Dr. Foster's equipment might have done. To her, "You're too late," Dr. Foster said, not even trying to restart her equipment. "The subject's neurological functions are failing naturally. She has maybe 10 minutes before complete brain death." Security officers rushed into room 7, but instead of restraining me, they began destroying evidence. Computer hard drives were removed and smashed. Patient files were fed into industrial shredders. Anything that could link the facility to Project Mindbridge was being systematically eliminated. Federal agents, building secured, voices shouted from the hallway. All personnel remain in place, with hands visible. Dr. Matthews looked remarkably calm for someone whose entire operation was being raided. "Jake, I want you to understand something before the agents reach us. Everything you've seen tonight will be classified at levels beyond congressional oversight. Senator Vance's committee has no jurisdiction over national security operations. They have jurisdiction over human rights violations. They have jurisdiction over what the Department of Defense allows them to investigate. The first federal agent appeared in the doorway, weapon drawn, taking in the scene with trained efficiency. He was tall, professionally dressed, with the bearing of someone accustomed to classified operations. Agent David Morrison, FBI. Everyone step away from the patient, and put your hands where I can see them. I raised my hands, but remained close to Sarah's table. Agent Morrison, this woman needs immediate medical attention. They've been conducting illegal experiments on her brain. We're aware of the allegations, Mr. Thompson. He moved closer to examine Sarah's condition, and I could see his expression change as he took in the extent of her injuries. Jesus Christ, what did you do to her? Dr. Matthews stepped forward. Agent Morrison, I'm Dr. James Matthews, Chief of Psychiatric Services. This patient has been receiving standard treatment for severe psychological trauma. She's experiencing complications from her pre-existing conditions. Standard treatment doesn't involve industrial restraints and military-grade electronic equipment. Helen Carson appeared in the doorway, flanked by two men in expensive suits who clearly weren't FBI agents. Agent Morrison, I'm Director Carson. I believe there's been some confusion about the nature of our operations here. One of the suits stepped forward and handed Morrison an official document. Agent Morrison, this facility is operating under Department of Defense oversight. Your investigation is suspended pending national security review. Morrison read the document, his jaw tightening. This is a federal warrant signed by a federal judge. It supersedes any DOD classification. Not anymore. The suit produced a second document. Presidential Executive Order, issued 2 hours ago. All Project Minebridge facilities are now under direct military jurisdiction. Civilian law enforcement has no authority here. You can't just declare a hospital a military installation. We can, and we have. Agent Morrison, you and your team need to vacate this facility immediately. I watched in horror as federal agents who'd come to investigate war crimes were being ordered to leave by government officials who'd clearly been prepared for this exact scenario. Sarah's hand moved slightly, trying to reach toward me. Her lips were moving, trying to form words around the breathing apparatus. She's trying to say something, I told Agent Morrison. He leaned closer to Sarah's table, listening carefully to her whispered words. Recording ... hidden ... medical wing. Locker ... 47 ... double quotes. Her hand went limp. The monitors showed her brain activity flatlining. Sarah Chen, graduate student in psychology, died at 4:23 a.m. while federal agents watched. Government officials cover up the experiments that had destroyed her mind. Agent Morrison looked at the flatlined monitors, then at Dr. Matthews. This woman was 24 years old. She was admitted for anxiety disorder. She was suffering from severe neurological trauma that required aggressive intervention. Dr. Matthews replied, her death is a tragic outcome, but not unexpected, given the severity of her condition. Her condition that you created with your experiments. Her condition that we attempted to treat using the most advanced psychiatric techniques available. The men in suits were already ushering the federal agents toward the exit. Agent Morrison, your investigation is concluded. Any evidence collected tonight is classified and must be surrendered to DoD personnel. As the agents were forced to leave, Morrison caught my eye and mouthed silently, Locker 47. But even as I processed Sarah's final message, I knew that whatever evidence she'd hidden would disappear long before anyone could retrieve it. The cover-up was too well organized, too thoroughly planned. Sarah Chen had died trying to expose the truth, and the people who'd killed her were going to walk away unpunished. They released me at dawn, with a cover story already prepared. Sarah Chen had died from complications related to severe psychiatric illness. The federal investigation had been a routine inquiry that found no evidence of wrongdoing. I was a dedicated employee who'd tried his best to help a troubled patient, but Sarah's final message had given me one last chance. Locker 47 in the medical wing contained a second recording device, this one documenting weeks of Project Mindbridge operations. Sarah had hidden cameras throughout the facility, gathering evidence that went far beyond what I'd already collected. The recordings showed government officials discussing expansion plans to other cities, military personnel training on the memory modification equipment, financial transactions that proved the program was being funded through black budget allocations that bypassed congressional oversight. Most damning were the recordings of Dr. Matthews and Helen Carson discussing what they called disposal protocols for patients who didn't survive the procedures. Bodies were cremated immediately, death certificates were falsified, and families were given fabricated explanations for their loved ones' deaths. I spent 3 days copying and organizing the evidence before calling Senator Vance's office again. Mr. Thompson, we're relieved to hear from you. Agent Morrison filed a report about what happened at the facility. Senator, I have additional evidence, much more than what I transmitted during the raid. Mr. Thompson, I need to inform you that Project Mindbridge has been classified above our committee's clearance level. We're no longer authorized to investigate these allegations. They're covering it up. They're protecting national security, operations from congressional interference. They're protecting war criminals from prosecution. A long pause. Mr. Thompson, if you have evidence of crimes against American citizens, there are other avenues you might consider, such as investigative journalists, human rights organizations. Sometimes public pressure can accomplish what official channels cannot. After I hung up, I realized that the government officials who'd shut down the FBI investigation had made a crucial error. They'd assumed that congressional oversight was the only threat to their operations. They hadn't considered what would happen if their crimes became public knowledge. I contacted Rebecca Martinez, an investigative journalist with the Washington Chronicle, who specialized in exposing government corruption. We met at a coffee shop in downtown D.C., where I provided her with copies of all the evidence I'd gathered. This is incredible, she said after reviewing Sarah's recordings. If this is authentic, it documents systematic human rights violations by multiple government agencies. It's authentic. And there are facilities, like Clearwater, operating in 11 other states. How do you know? I showed her the expansion documents from Dr. Matthews's office. Project Mindbridge is planning to process over 3,000 subjects in the next 2 years. Mental health patients, prison inmates, anyone they consider a security risk. Rebecca spent 2 weeks verifying the evidence with independent sources. Military whistleblowers confirmed the existence of memory modification research. Former patients from other facilities came forward with similar stories of lost memories and altered personalities. Medical experts analyzed the brain scan footage and confirmed that the procedures shown would cause permanent neurological damage. The story broke on a Tuesday morning with the headline, "Government Program Destroys Minds of American Citizens in Secret Medical Experiments." Within hours, the story was picked up by every major news network. Congressional leaders who'd been excluded from Project Mindbridge's oversight demanded immediate investigations. Human rights organizations filed federal lawsuits. The families of patients who'd died during the procedures came forward to demand answers about their loved ones' deaths. Dr. Matthews, Dr. Foster, and Helen Carson were arrested on federal charges of conspiracy, murder, and violations of medical ethics. The Clearwater facility was shut down immediately, and patients who'd undergone memory modification were transferred to legitimate hospitals for evaluation and treatment. But the victory felt hollow. The government officials who'd overseen Project Mindbridge disappeared into classified positions where they couldn't be prosecuted. The Department of Defense claimed the program had been operating without proper authorization and denied any knowledge of human rights violations. Most importantly, the victims couldn't be saved. Marcus Webb remained in hiding with fragmented memories of a family he might never fully recall. The dozens of patients who'd been processed through Room 7 were left with artificial personalities that bore no resemblance to their original selves. And Sarah Chen was still dead, her brilliant mind destroyed by people who'd viewed her curiosity as a threat to national security. 6 months after the story broke, I received a call from Agent Morrison. "Jake, I thought you should know. We found evidence that Project Mindbridge had backup facilities that weren't identified in the original investigation. Where? 3 locations we know about. Probably more we haven't discovered yet. They moved operations underground after the publicity, but they didn't shut down. The program was still running. Different facilities, different cover stories, but the same systematic destruction of human consciousness in the name of national security." I realized then that exposing Project Mindbridge hadn't ended the program. It had just forced it to become more careful about hiding its crimes. The congressional hearing was held in a sterile committee room with cameras recording every word for posterity. I sat at a witness table facing senators who'd spent months reviewing evidence of atrocities committed in their names, funded with taxpayer money they'd voted to allocate. Senator Patricia Vance leaned forward, her voice carrying the weight of someone who'd seen too much truth in too short a time. "Mr. Thompson, in your professional opinion, how many patients at Clearwater Mental Health were subjected to unauthorized memory modification procedures?" Based on the documents I reviewed, at least 43 individuals underwent what Dr. Matthews called cognitive restructuring. 29 survived the procedures with permanent neurological damage. 14 died from complications and were cremated immediately to prevent autopsies. And these procedures were performed without patient consent. Patients were told they were receiving standard psychiatric treatment. None were informed that experimental memory erasure would be performed on their brains. Senator William Hayes, the ranking minority member, interrupted. "Mr. Thompson, isn't it possible that these procedures were legitimate medical treatments that simply had unfortunate outcomes?" "Senator, I watched through an observation window as they systematically destroyed a woman's memories while she screamed for them to stop. Sarah Chen was a healthy graduate student when she was admitted. She died 2 weeks later from brain hemorrhages caused by experimental procedures. But Ms. Chen was admitted for psychiatric evaluation after displaying paranoid behavior. Ms. Chen was admitted because she'd discovered classified research files at her university. Her paranoid behavior was accurate reporting of government surveillance that began after she tried to investigate memory modification experiments." The hearing continued for 6 hours. I described everything I'd witnessed, provided documentation of the financial transactions that funded Project Mindbridge, and presented testimony from other survivors who'd recovered fragments of their stolen memories. But I could see in the senators' faces that justice would be limited. The program had been too highly classified, involved too many agencies, and implicated too many officials for complete accountability. Dr. Matthews received a 25-year sentence for murder and conspiracy. Dr. Foster was convicted of medical malpractice and sentenced to 15 years. Helen Carson plea bargained for a 10-year sentence in exchange for testimony about government officials who'd overseen the program. None of the Pentagon officials were prosecuted. The Department of Defense claimed the program had operated without proper oversight and announced new policies to prevent similar abuses in the future. 3 months after the hearing, I visited Sarah Chen's grave. Her parents had arranged a small funeral after her body was finally released by federal authorities. The headstone was simple: Sarah Chen, 1999 to 2023. Beloved daughter, brilliant mind, seeker of truth. I brought flowers and a printed copy of the congressional testimony. Everything I'd promised her in that hospital room, I'd delivered. The truth about Project Mindbridge was now part of the official record. The program had been exposed, its leaders prosecuted, its victims acknowledged. But Sarah was still dead at 24, her potential destroyed by people who'd viewed her intelligence as a threat. Marcus Webb found me at the cemetery. He looked healthier than when I'd last seen him, but his eyes still carried the haunted expression of someone trying to reconstruct an identity from scattered fragments. "I wanted to thank you," he said, "for keeping your promise to expose them. Did you ever find your family? My wife remarried last year. She thought I was dead, and in many ways, she was right. The Marcus Webb she married doesn't exist anymore." He showed me a photograph of 2 children. "My kids are 7 and 5 now. They don't remember having a father, and I don't remember being their father. The memories are just gone. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be proud, because of what you did. Other families won't go through what mine did." But as I walked back to my car, I thought about Agent Morrison's phone call. Project Mindbridge was still operating somewhere, under different names, in facilities that hadn't been discovered yet. The program had been wounded, not killed. I'd kept my promise to Sarah Chen, but the price of truth had been higher than I'd expected. She'd died believing that exposing Project Mindbridge would prevent others from suffering the same fate. I knew better now. In a world where classified programs could be moved and renamed and hidden behind new layers of security, there would always be another Room 7, another Dr. Matthews, another young woman whose curiosity would be deemed a threat to national security. The only difference was that now I knew to look for them. Standing beside Sarah's grave, I made her a new promise. The first one had been about exposing the truth. This one was about making sure the truth mattered. Project Mindbridge was still out there, still destroying minds in the name of national security. But now it had an enemy who understood how it operated, who knew what to look for, and who would never stop hunting for the next facility. I walked away from that cemetery knowing that Sarah Chen's death would either be the end of my involvement in this nightmare, or the beginning of a much longer war against people who believed they could rewrite human consciousness without consequence. The choice was mine to make, and I'd already decided